We examine Sith Lords on today's episode of Star Wars Factions Compared. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Factions Compared. We've got an interesting episode today. We'll be examining in depth 4 Sith factions, trying to determine which Dark Lord was the best. The 4 Dark Lords we'll be looking at specifically are Naga, Sadow, Tenebrae, Palpatine, and Darth Krait. We'll be ranking the Sith not only on which ones were most powerful, but which Sith best led their empire. Let's start first with Naga Sadow, a Sith born over 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. As one of the first true Sith Lords, Naga Sadow seized control of the Sith during a period of stagnation. The Dark Lord would then form what we would know as the Sith Empire. As Dark Lord, Sadow was really the first who opened the Sith ranks to not only those of blood from the original Sith species, but anyone who could harness the dark side. He advocated, however, not only for a more inclusive, but also more aggressive and expansionist Sith Empire. After subduing his rivals, he collected the forces of the Sith from across every planet and struck out against the Republic in a conflict known as the Great Hyperspace War. He attacked quickly, relying on surprise and brutality, along with battle meditation and his iconic Sith meditation sphere, to win early battles against the Republic. To make up for lack of troops, the Sith Empire at this point was much smaller than the Republic. Sadow used Sith trickery to create an illusory fleet. However, his scheme was discovered by the Jedi and the Republic, and the Sith were quickly routed. Not only were they forced to retreat back to Sith space, but the Republic counterattacked, and counterattacked hard, taking back planets and organizing a Sith genocide. Over this loss, Sadow would exile himself to Yavin 4, where he would practice Sith alchemy, eventually placing himself in stasis. Years later, Sith Frieda Nad would kill Sadow after the older Sith shared his teachings. When evaluating the Sith Lord, I think it would be fair to say that he was over-ambitious. Ambition is typically a positive trait in the Sith, but he lacked patience. Still, he was incredibly influential, especially in how he shaped the Sith moving forward, departing from a prior focus on pure bloodlines and instead embracing strength, wherever the source. Next up we have Tenebrae, Vitiate, Valkorion, the Eternal Emperor, the Darksider of many names. Tenebrae was an incredibly powerful Darkside user who, since birth, has had an unquenchable lust for destruction and power. This appetite would make the Sith a force in the galaxy for over a millennia. Molded by a dark childhood of murder and torture, Tenebrae would take his first steps into greatness after the death of Naga Sadow. After the Sith's defeat in the Great Hyperspace War, Vitiate summoned 8,000 Darkside users, absorbing the life force of every being while also destroying them in an intense Sith ritual, which gave him immense power and supposed immortality. He then, along with all other Sith who survived the genocide, left the known galaxy and headed to the unknown regions, where he built a new empire. From the darkness, he manipulated galactic events, creating the Mandalorian War, turning Revan and Malak to the dark side, while also developing his abilities to transfer his essence to other bodies, not unlike the later Emperor Palpatine. Over many years, the Sith Empire returned to prominence, and Vitiate would eventually attack the Republic itself in what was known as the Great Galactic War. During this war and in the subsequent Cold War, the Sith were, as an organization, at one of their most strong positions ever, controlling over half the galaxy. Vitiate, of course, yearned for more power and was defeated at Droma Kos, as he was attempting to perform his Sith ritual of annihilation on the entire galaxy. His spirit, however, was not vanquished. He would return to hiding, now taking control of the Eternal Empire. The Eternal Empire lashed out at the galaxy, dominating both the Republic and the Sith Empire. Valkorion, as he was now known, was again in a position of immense power. He would, however, eventually be defeated for the final time by a galactic-wide rebellion. Still, Tenebrae was extraordinarily powerful, and he achieved a great degree of control over the galaxy. His longevity was also unmatched, and he was active for over 1.5 millennia. He was perhaps the perfect combination of the Sith tenets of extreme power, patience in working from the shadows, and foresight. Let's move next to Sidious, and one of my favorite quotes from the Revenge of the Sith novelization. And then there was Palpatine, of course. He was beyond power. He showed nothing of what might be within. Though seen with the eyes of the dark side itself, Palpatine was an event horizon. Beneath his entirely ordinary surface was absolute perfect nothingness. Darkness beyond darkness. A black hole of the Force. Most of us know Palpatine, but it's still important to critically examine the man's achievements and power. Darth Sidious was arguably the ideal Bay Knight Sith, in that he utilized not only power, but also cunning and manipulation. Working from the shadows, Palpatine conquered the Republic, transforming it into a Sith Empire, while also exterminating more of the Jedi than any darkside user before or since. Under his rule, the Galactic Empire was the dominant force within the galaxy for over 20 years. Still, a number of military and organizational mistakes made by Palpatine allowed the Rebel Alliance to not only form, but also flourish, eventually destroying both Death Stars and seriously diminishing Imperial rule. However, even with his first death at the hands of his apprentice, Palpatine was not finished. He learned the ability Transfer Essence, which, although difficult, allowed him to move his spirit into new clone bodies. Palpatine re-emerged from the core, initiating Operation Shadow Hand, a devastating campaign against the New Republic. However, even with a host of darkside users, the best technology available, a supply of clone bodies, and dozens of super weapons, Palpatine ultimately failed. And really, he never came close to restoring the Empire to its full glory. Besides for his darkside abilities, which were both numerous and deep, Palpatine's greatest assets were his cunning and ability to manipulate others. Ironically though, his foresight, which served him very well during the days of the Republic, failed him as Emperor. He made a series of major strategic mistakes, from allowing the Empire to become large and bloated, to dedicating too many resources to mega projects. Palpatine was certainly not without fault. Still, the fact that he managed to almost exterminate the Jedi and held control of the galaxy for over 20 years cannot be ignored. Finally, we have Darth Krait. Unlike most Sith, Krayt was arguably not totally evil, instead yearning for absolute peace and order within the galaxy. Krayt was the son of a Jedi, and famously raised among Tusken Raiders. Despite being active during the Clone Wars, Krayt survived Order 66, returning to Tatooine. While working as a bounty hunter after the formation of the Empire, Krayt discovered a Sith holocron on Korriban. This was only the beginning of his shift to the dark side, however, as he would later be captured and extensively tortured by the Yuuzhan Vong, and also taught by fallen Jedi Vergir. After escaping the clutches of the Vong, Krayt returned to Korriban and used the Second Galactic Civil War and other major events to hide his growing Sith faction. His faction was based off the philosophy of the One Sith, meaning he would be the primary Dark Lord and all others would be completely subservient to his will. His power continued to grow, notably shown as he and Luke Skywalker worked together to defeat Abeloth from beyond shadows. He was still alive over 100 years after the Battle of Yavin, relying primarily on healing techniques and Sith magic. In 127 ABY, he initiated the Sith Imperial rule, where his one Sith was victorious and ruled the galaxy for several years. However, less than a decade after his ascension, he was killed by Cade Skywalker after being unable to successfully exterminate all Jedi. How powerful was Krayt though? Well, we know the ancient Sith of Korriban saw him as somewhat of an imposter, however that was most likely due to philosophical differences. I do think it is notable, however, that he was unable to heal the injuries inflicted upon him by the Yuuzhan Vong, and especially as he grew older, had a major fear of dying. His one Sith ideology was drastic, and while did encourage loyalty in many, also caused some to turn against him. Krayt was an incredible fighter, but was not often in prime condition. Still, he was unquestionably the most powerful Sith of his era. Like Palpatine, he was very good at predicting the future, waiting over 100 years to strike against the galaxy. But where does he rank among the other darkside users we talked about today? With our brief descriptions out of the way, let's rank our Sith from worst to best. Coming in at number 4 is Naga Sadow. As I said, Saga was ambitious, but without patience. His legacy of opening the Sith up to everyone cannot be ignored, but you can also not forget his failure in the Great Hyperspace War and the subsequent Sith genocide. At number 3 we have Darth Krait. I think Krayt and Sadow are a level of power below the next two entries on this list. Although he did show some skill with healing, he was still basically perpetually bothered by the wounds inflicted by the Yuuzhan Vong. While he was the first Sith to control the galaxy in a century, his rule lasted for only 7 years. Let's compare that with Emperor Palpatine. Not only did Palpatine rule for longer, but in my opinion, he also had a more difficult journey to his position of power. Before Palpatine's rise, the Jedi were the dominant Force users in the galaxy. To be fair, the same can be said of Darth Krait. However, the pre-Clone Wars era Republic was also in a time of peace, and Palpatine had very few allies. He was also incredibly powerful, mastering not only advanced techniques like Essence Transfer or Force Storm, but also defeating many powerful Jedi in one-on-one combat. But in my opinion, he cannot stand against Vitiate, the best Sith on this list. Vitiate not only managed to survive for over 1.5 millennia, but also had direct control of the galaxy, whether through the Eternal Fleet or the Sith Empire, for many years. He and Palpatine are arguably fairly close in power, especially Palpatine during the Dark Empire era, but whereas Palpatine ruled for 20 years and the Empire struggled afterwards, Vitiate was a force for much longer. That, however, is just my opinion. What do you think? How was my ranking? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments, and also vote in the upper right hand corner. Let me know which Sith you think was best. Thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.